The continuation of stories of the Dioscuri and the design and name of the Dokana cult gate reflect the evolving nature of the lattice design from basic fishing nets and cage patterns to a gateway between worlds. There is also a linguistic connection that has been made between the word Dokana and the word diktiotos, meaning righteous, and diktioton, meaning made in a net fashion, lattice, or trellis, which are believed to be its etymological origins. The design appears on entryways and vaulted temple columns in capitals throughout time and space, from the expansive Roman Empire, Portugal to Jerusalem and beyond. Multifaceted versions of these openings and gates to the underworld or to the heavens have appeared in Egypt, Mesopotamia, Scandinavia, and in cultures located from India to Japan. My name is Renee Whitehouse. You're listening to Detours in Archaeology. This week, we're going to pass through the gateways in between worlds. Chthonic deities, like the Dokana. In the Odyssey, Homer said that the Dioscuri are an important link to the gods because of their act of presiding over oath-making, with an analogy to the farming of wheat. Relating to the bonds of fraternity and brotherhood, which are prevailed upon for the swearing of oaths, on votive reliefs they are depicted with a variety of symbols representing the concept of twinhood, such as the Dokana. That symbol is basically two upright pieces of wood connected by two crossbeams, a pair of amphora, a pair of shields, or a pair of snakes. Homer alluded to the analogous etymological roots of physiosos ea, which probably means something more than natural beauty, when he said, physiosos ea holds them both, yet they are still living. Phio, where we get physiosos, means to bring forth, to produce, and ea is from zaiai, meaning wheat or god, also connected to the earth or Gaia, and thus life. In either case, it seems that in Homer's use, the phrase means life prolonging, which also ties to wheat or grain producing, and therefore to wealth producing and giving, because Ea also means treasury or an underground place of storage. This, in particular, might come from the myth of the Argonauts and the Golden Fleece from the Argonautica, a Greek poem written by Apollonius Rhodius in the 3rd century BCE, in which the fleece, being made of gold, was stored in the underground location called an Ea. The Argonauts' duty was to collect the fleece from King Aeetes of Colchis, the region by the Black Sea in modern-day Georgia. Long epic poem short, the king didn't want to give up the fleece, so his wife Medea led the group to the fleece after falling in love with Jason, which was, oddly in some versions, hanging from a sacred oak tree, which was the sacred tree of Zeus. The twins reflect this gateway on their own as chthonic gods, with their symbols of snakes climbing up the Dokana gate pillars. Snakes are sometimes improperly considered to be wicked or evil creatures, but the opposite is often true in many ancient cultures. A more in-depth talk about special snakes can be found on OSP with Quetzalcoatl and in my Take Me to Snurch article and podcast episode. In the ancient Greek world, they are seen to be constantly moving between the heavens and Hades, like the twin brothers. Even one of the epithets that Zeus had, Zeus Ktesibios, from kthesis, meaning processing property, was shown as a snake. When culturally connected with oaths taken in front of the Laconian cult gate, the Dokana gate symbol, contracts would be privy to the gods as well, so it was really important that they were kept. These symbols, the netting and the snakes, represented the heroic deeds of the brothers and would appear at the tops of columns in art pieces, in structural architecture, and on temple arches. While not directly connected in architectural style, the symbology still existed in Mesopotamia as the vault of heaven, in Egypt as the door of the sky, and later, of course, in Rome as a vaulted underground chamber called the mundus sky. With the snake as a guardian, it was a nod to the twin gates and the punishments that would be inflicted on individuals who would break their oaths, no matter which gods they were made under. Stories tell that the unworthy would be caught in the snakes and netting and sent for punishment in the underworld. As mentioned in the first part of this series, the Spartans had a pretty close connection to the Dokana symbols as they carried beam figures or Dokana in front of the armies on campaigns. They had them on friezes in the Spartan city and on shield emblems because the Dioscuri were from Sparta and were the brothers of Helen of Troy. But really, she's Helen of Sparta. The Pillars of Hercules is also reminiscent of the netting design of the twins. Also, the pillars that were set up by Solomon as part of the architecture of the Temple of Jerusalem. The biblical account explains that the capital or ornamental top of the pillars had a trellis or network design. This trellis work, called a sebaka from a root of interweave, denotes the lattice of a window and has parallelism with the word net. This information comes from the biblical myth of Jacob at Bethel, but this isn't talking about the Pillars of Heracles or Hercules. This temple, however, wasn't the origin of this connection with the gateway. That backstory has to do with the tale of Heracles' 12 labors, specifically his 10th, wherein Heracles had to collect the cattle of Zirion from the far west after crossing the Libyan desert and bring them back to Eurystheus, the king of the Mycenaean city Tiryns. This area, being on the western edge of the ancient Greek world, was part of the Mauritanian colonies in present-day Morocco. In this region, the seafaring Phoenicians had already laid down trade routes that had transferred their gods along with them. Because of the connections between these groups, gods and heroes like Heracles were conflated with the local gods. For Heracles specifically, the Phoenician and Punic counterpart was Melkart, Lord of Tyre, king of the underworld, protector of the universe, and annual vegetation cycle. On the island of Garida, which is present-day Cadiz, the city-state of Tyre contained the westernmost temple of Tyrian, where these deities were worshipped during the height of Phoenician culture from 1000 to 500 BCE. Herodotus wrote that the pillars of Melkart on this island temple were the true Pillars of Hercules. These pillars appear in the mythos with great variety, depending on which version one reads. Due to its location in the ancient world, at the Strait of Gibraltar was seen as a gateway to the edge of the known world, although not literally the edge, and opened to a world of gods and monsters. In some sources, Heracles built the mountains on either side of the channel, Monte Hacho and Jebel Musa, to either give Atlas freedom from holding up the sky or to narrow the channel to keep larger monsters from entering the Mediterranean Sea. Meanwhile, in some Roman texts, Hercules created the channel himself by smashing through the mountain that used to be Atlas instead of climbing it, so he could easily sail to the Garden of the Hesperides on the island Erythea. These mountains, as the pillars, were so well recorded down through the centuries that Spain added them to their coat of arms and the coat of arms of areas such as Cadiz and several states within the countries of Mexico, Peru, and Bolivia, and on the seal of San Diego, California. Also in the real world, they do have statues of Heracles holding up the pillars on either one of these rocks, the Rock of Gibraltar, the European pillar, and on top of Jebel Musa on the North African shore. Mesopotamia's Vault of Heaven reasserts itself as a money angle in an ancient Assyrian text describing business transactions in front of the lattice design. It is not in a direct mythological context, but in a real legal dispute between two merchants concerning a large shipment of copper. One person swore an oath of purgation, meaning that he was putting himself in the god's hands. Another example of this is the oath of purgation of Pope Leo III in 800. The other person had to document everything in the text called the Gate of the God. What the everything covers are the cost of transport, deficiency caused by weights used, and losses in all minas, a unit of weight in currency, compensating half of it. It's a bit more interesting that a vault of heaven would have been such an important real legal thing, like the O's in front of a lattice. Egypt's door of the sky is a bit different. In ancient Egypt mythology, there are 12 gates that each soul must pass through on their journey to the afterlife. These gates weren't often tied to a lattice directly in myths. However, most of the gates of night that souls would pass through are either guarded by or one is helped through by snakes. See Ra's Journey video on Overly Sarcastic Productions on YouTube for stories of a lot of snakes. One version of the Dokana type gateway is found in the Book of Gates from the New Kingdom, which narrates the passing of an individual. This is another major illustrated compendium of Egyptian texts with disparate pieces being written by multiple people over the decades, much like the Book of the Dead itself. There is not one single canonical copy, with most small versions being written by scribes on papyrus scrolls upon commission, usually costing a deben of silver. This quote-unquote book is called the Book of the Dead, even though the name translates closer to Book of Coming Forth by Day or Emerging Forth into the Light. This was, again, quote-unquote, written in the New Kingdom and contains magic spells that would assist the dead along their journeys. These spells were copies of the older coffin and pyramid texts dating from the 3rd millennium BCE. While there weren't outright descriptions of lattice work, there are indirect links through the flowers, gardens, which covered the Dokana pillars over the gods, possibly depicting another symbolic connection between the worlds of life and death. Another perfect doorway are false doors, also known as ka doors. They are common as gate or doorways to the afterlife. As discussed in my Egyptian temple article / podcast episode, these doorways were literally built into walls and appeared as a sunken relief stela made of mostly limestone blocks. These doors date back to the Old Kingdom, with some of the first being in the mastabas built in the First Dynasty in Abydos and Nakada. Here we find the ka doors on all 4 sides with offering niches underneath. Smaller mastabas were also found with the doorway facades, but they usually only had 1 or 2 and were more commonly from Dynasty 3 onward. Expanding even further, we have the poetic Edda poem Grimnismal. The word lattice has been translated, depending on the text, as a net, fence, and gate. Working as a sacred enter gate, the lattice can be a barrier for trespassers or an entryway for the welcome souls. In a section from the translated text, Valgrind is the lattice called, in the plain that stand, holy before the holy gates, but few only know how it is closed with lock. Translation by Thorpe from Iceland in 1866 in Edda Sæmundur Heinsfroda. For a slight explanation, Valgrind is the Death Gate, the name of the outer gate to Valhalla, the afterlife of warriors who died in battle. This name, translated from Old Norse, means Fence of the Fallen Cross. Depending on which story one reads, Valgrind is either one of 540 gates that lead to Valhalla, or is the name of the fence around Hell in general. I'm talking hell with 1 L, not hell with 2 L's. Hell with 1 L is just the underworld that hell leads, just like Hades would lead the entire underworld. which is also named Hades in Greece. In either case, this gate is one which only allowed the best dead warriors chosen by Odin and Freya to enter. Moving again to Chinese moon gates. Much of the purpose of building the moon gates, along with the openwork windows, was and continues to be for the visual frameworks. The author Park describes how the framing gives depth and layers to the garden, giving a special sense of distance and atmosphere to condense and amplify the beauty of nature. In the moon gate design, the opening is more important than the actual frame itself, as the opening is said to be a representation of the full moon, hence the name, and also symbolizes the wish for joy and happiness. There are so many places that you can see this in China, but also outside. Not all Chinese moon gates, or men, are built with a lattice or trellis motif. It seems to be more of a matter for the importance of luck and joy rather than the displaying of class and nobility, although they definitely changed through time and where they were being built. Walkways are often housed within the solid dragon walls with the curving or undulating top, along with the lattice design windows, which you can also see in many countries in Southeast Asia, where Chinese religions and traditions were huge in royal architecture. As the design spread throughout the world, they would have been built into garden walls or as freestanding structures. For instance, as I said, in the gates of multiple Southeast Asian countries, temples, and palaces, where the Chinese ruled for a time, or where Chinese immigrants migrated to, such as in Europe or in America, and also in Bermuda. These moon gates were transposed into wide cultural ubiquity in Bermuda in the 19th century by Englishmen, such as the Duke of Westminster. He was primarily interested in the displaying of class aspect of the original Chinese design. But their symbolism here is a bit distinct because although it is also for the wish of joy and a very popular spot for wedding photos and for kisses, it is often regarded as a sign of good luck to all the newlyweds who walk through it. To me, I am being a nerd for a minute, this looks like a Stargate. I am always very happy and lucky to pass through it, married or not. But in either case, it is supposed to invoke a peaceful existence, a kind of feng shui and even Zen gardens. Bringing me to Japan. Ama and the Doman, Ama divers, traditionally female free divers for pearls, have existed in many provinces across Japan for around 2,000 years. They use a special technique called isobue, ocean whistle, to prepare for their 50-second breath. While on the bottom, either as kachido ama, swimming from shore to shallow sites, or funado ama, traveling in boats to deeper sites, these women collect abalone as well as seaweed, sea cucumbers, and sea snails. Aspects of the legend come from a belief that abalone and the ama divers have a spiritual connection to Ise Jingu, a precinct in Japan that houses 125 Shinto shrines dedicated to Amaterasu Omikami, centered around Naiku, or Toyo Uke no Omikami, centered around Gekku, Shinto goddesses of the sun and the universe, and the goddess of agriculture and industry, respectively. Ama does mean heaven, and it is believed that eating abalone contributes to the longevity and youth, and therefore the gods would approve of them as a ritual gift. 3 times a year, Ama give food offerings called shinsen, composed of noshiawabi, dried strips of abalone meat held together with straw as part of Shinto rituals to pray for safe and abundant diving season. The lattice design appears on their ancient dress that consisted of white loincloths and headscarves marked with 2 different symbols, and today they wear full-body white suits. These symbols are the seiman and the doman, created with black sewing thread or purple shell dye. The Seimen is a 5-pointed star drawn with a single stroke, so there are no gaps for evil to enter. And the Domen is a lattice made up of 5 horizontal lines and 4 vertical lines. The spaces between the lines represent the many eyes watching out for evil, and the complex structure means that there is no clear entrance for evil to get in. These are carried for good luck and protection, and the legend says that if an Ama diver is seen in the ocean without the Seimen and Domen, then she is a Tomokazuki. The Tomokazuki is one of the most feared yokai, as this sea demon takes on the appearance of an Ama diver and will materialize in front of a real diver and will attempt to lure them in by offering abalone. If the real Ama accepts, then the Tomokazuki leads them deep into the ocean and drowns them, making them become a Tomokazuki themselves as the spirits of the drowned Ama. Whenever you look up pictures of Japan, especially if you look up pictures of temples, you'll probably see a torii gate. The torii are the red or vermilion gateways that lead to or at the entrance of or within the jinja or Shinto shrines, marking the space on the other side as sacred. Torii literally translates to bird abode, and jinja or shinsa from other dialects means place of the gods, whose main purpose was not to worship but to enshrine kami, holy powers or spirits, and housing sacred objects. Similar to the Dokana gate, the torii represents a watched over gateway between our world and the realm of the gods. While it's not technically a lattice shape, it is similar to the Dioscuri, and a similar shaping and inspiration could be drawn upon, especially with the myriad of different styles that a torii can take, although I'm not saying that they are directly connected to each other. The torii first appeared in the mid-Heian period, referenced in a text from 922 CE, with the oldest extant example built in 1535. There are various examples of myths and legends ascribing the origins of the torii that connect to the Torana from India, the Pelu from China, and the Hongsolman from Korea, which was spread through Buddhism, which was everywhere in Asia that I saw in my tour. Since, however, that actual origin is unknown, a single theory has not gained widespread acceptance, namely among scholars. The etymology has even more speculation built into it. The name torii is thought to be derived from toriru, meaning to pass through and enter. This transition to bird perch, which looks similar to actual torii, are thought to bring good luck to villages by warding off evil spirits. The Indian word torana also means bird perch, and the tor part of the word is how several European languages got the word door. The Buddhist style and the torana look much more lattice-like and are seen in examples in many places in India, in Malaysia, in China, Korea. In any case, this architecture is seen as a link to the sacred, to the divine. In Japan, they are typically red because of the sacredness of the color's connection with the sun, fire, and life, and a possible loose connection to Amaterasu and her other forms as a snake and a dragon. The snake aspect brings up another interesting but completely unintentional comparison between the ancient Western and Eastern, even contemporary cultures. Some historians have equated Amaterasu to Helen of Troy, who is also connected to the Orphic snakes of the Dokana Gate. The divine nature of serpents and Amaterasu sleeping with the Seo, an unmarried female of the imperial family, in those forms, bridge the gap between worlds. This could, however, be an ancient composite of the white snake goddess Benzaiten, or the male snake aspect Ukajin. The Japanese Buddhist goddess originated from the Hindu goddess Saraswati. Worship of Benzaiten arrived in Japan during the 6th through the 8th centuries, mainly via the Chinese translations of the Sutra of the Golden Light, connecting the Torii gateways and Shinto shrines across space and through time. For the lattice as a gateway, it doesn't seem to go much deeper than what the myths show. In many contexts, the lattice is a gateway that carries extra connotations, which is described in the myths. But it's also shown within a specific culture. It's a portal and a window to the underworld and heavens, and a trap for oathbreakers. Otherwise, lattices as doorways to the heavens regularly appear in public places and on public buildings, but also in tombs. Because their tradition was to swear oaths and make honorable contracts in front of others. Plus, the gods are watching over the citizenry in general. There does seem to be a theme that someone is watching you or over you from the other side, which is what windows are also good for, a transparent barrier. The design and the historic and mythological context could be and have been greatly expanded upon, but I'll leave that reading to you all who want more knowledge and more cultural understanding than I currently have. On my last part of this series, I'll be breaking down the use of lattice as a wall or a barrier and what that means in different cultures. Thank you for listening to Detours in Archaeology, Gateways in Between Worlds. I am so pleased that you joined me again this week. I highly recommend, if you want to learn more, following the link in the description to the article where you can read about what you just heard and then look up a lot more information that I provide at the bottom in further reading and citations. Links are available in the show notes. Please like this episode and subscribe to this podcast and share it with your friends. That is the best way to help the podcast grow. I am glad that I am back from my sojourn through Asia, but I will say I so miss it. I miss it so much. It was amazing. I had an amazing time, and I have so many more stories to look up and do research on and to share. All the music comes from Scott Buckley at scottbuckley.com.au. For the fun fact this week, I'm going to tell you something I learned in Mongolia. I never really thought about it because I've never had horse or camel or yak, but they hunt them at different times of the year. In winter, they go for yaks because they are very hardy and, thick, so they make a lot of stews and everything. And in the summer, they eat horses, I guess because they are a lot leaner. I did try horse. I thought it was pretty good, but it did have a grassy aftertaste after a while. But it was still quite good. And we also had the fermented horse milk, which is harvested in summer, let ferment, and then frozen. And it could be frozen until the winter, which we were drinking it right before spring. And it tastes so strange, but not bad, but just so strange for my palate. But it's supposed to be very good for you, like good for your lungs and liver. So I did drink like half a glass. Our guide, who is from Mongolia, loves this stuff and drinks so much of it on his own. I was really in love with the Mongolian milk tea, which is green tea with milk and salt. It's so yummy. Okay. If you have any fun facts that are true, do not hesitate to reach out, email me on my website, drop a comment on this podcast, or email me directly at detoursinarchaeology@gmail.com. Love to hear from you. And if you have any corrections for facts that I may have gotten wrong, pronunciations that I got wrong, As always, very sorry for my pronunciations. I am trying to get it right. I appreciate your patience. But yes, if you have any corrections, comments, questions, or you just want to say hi, also don't hesitate to email me, drop a comment, or anything of that nature. Really would appreciate hearing from anyone who's actually listening. Thanks again. After falling in love with, what was his name? Jason and the Argonauts. It's like, all right, bye.